Alright, so today I'm going to be changing the oil on my 2014 R6. It should be the same, exactly the same from 2008 to 2016 at least. And it's probably very similar before that also. So pretty much regardless of what year you have, it'll be almost the same. And even on some other bikes, it's basically the same idea. So I've already started it up, rode around a little bit just to warm up the oil, get it moving, get some of the shit that settles in there actually suspended in the oil, and now we have it here. So I have it set up. You don't necessarily need a rear stand, but it does make it a little bit easier. If you don't have a rear stand, you can just do it off of the kickstand, but whenever you're draining it and whenever you're checking the oil level, make sure you stand the bike up. Right. So here's basically what you're gonna need. I'm putting Yamaha lube in it. I tried a different oil the first time I changed the oil, and I didn't really like the way it made my engine sound worse and feel like a little bit, it didn't run quite as smooth to me. Maybe it was just me, but I'm gonna stick with Yamaha lube. That one just so happens to be 10W40. Get it on Amazon, the link will be in the description. K&N filter. So there's the filter I use, K&N, part number KN-204, and you can see it's wrench off. It makes it so much easier to get that little filter off and out of there. Really recommend using these. They're much easier than the ones that don't have the little nut on the top. So obviously you're oiling your filter. I have a big bucket back there. I drain my oil into there, and then I pour it back into the old container. So you need something to catch the oil. Make sure it's big enough, otherwise you'll have a mess. A basic set of metric wrenches, some metric Allens. Most of them come with your toolkit, with the exception of maybe like one that you might need. But you'd probably be able to get by with your toolkit, to be honest. And I'm gonna use some gloves just because I don't feel like having oil all over my hands. A little bucket to put all my bolts and screws and stuff in, just so I don't lose them. And the knife is just here because I had to cut something earlier. The first thing you're gonna want to do, other than starting it up and getting everything ready, most likely is to take this fairing off right here, and the bottom one, so that you can get in there. I've been told that you don't have to take it off. I don't really care. It's not that big of an issue to take it off, and it'll get you a lot better view of what I'm actually trying to do. So it's not very hard. You have a bolt here, bolt here. Actually, I don't think that one has to come off. You have one here, and then you have a bunch of little like clips and bolts. It's not very hard. Just take your time. Make sure you don't pull on anything. Take out all the bolts, and it should be relatively easy to get that fairing off. So I'm gonna get that done, and we'll be back. Alright, so now that you've got the left side fairing off, it should look something like this. The next thing we're going to be focusing on, I guess, is undoing this part of the shift linkage thing to where we can move it out the way and get to the oil filter. So for this you need a 10mm wrench. There is one included in your toolkit, so there's part of that, and you just turn. Get this off. Have to take the bolt all the way out in order to move the linkage out the way. So there you go, 10mm bolt, take it out. Then this, after that you can pull this. After that, you can pull this forward or outward, I guess you could say, and make sure there's a dot on here, which apparently every time I move my fingers it unfocuses, but right there near my thumb, that little dot has to line up with this line. Make sure you pay attention to that when you're putting it back, otherwise your bike won't shift right. So when you put that on there, dot lines up with the line, put the bowl back in, you're good to go. So there we have that. Then you just move this out the way, just let it hang like so, and now you can get at the oil filter. And right down here is the drain plug. We're gonna put I'm gonna crack this just a little bit, and then I'm gonna put the drip pan under it and let it drain, and then we'll be able to take the filter off. If you undo the filter now, you're gonna have a lot more oil spilling out everywhere. Not good. So I'm gonna crack this and then get that bucket under there. This should be, again, in your toolkit, 17 millimeter. Not that hard. Now that you've gotten this loose, once you crack it, it should be pretty much, you can get it off by hand. Out comes the bolt along with the oil. One thing to note, you don't want to heat your bike up too much, because that oil does get pretty fucking hot, and if your bike is very, very hot, you're gonna have really hot oil all over you, so that wouldn't be good. Okay, so now that the plug is out, 17 millimeter wrench on the filter. All right, so I don't know what the reason was. It's supposed to be 17 millimeter. It's just, I guess it was on there a little too tight. But anyway, loosen the filter up, and there you can see more oil popping out. Try and get it off kind of quickly to get a little bit less leakage. There you go. Oil filter off, dump it out. Before putting the new oil filter, I'd wipe, at least try and get some of the oil off of everything. It's not that big of a deal if you have a little bit of oil on everything, but it also kind of sucks to have your bike smell like oil for fucking forever because you didn't wipe anything up. So wipe that up a little bit. Get your new filter. These have a little plastic shit on them. Blast that off. They already have a little bit of oil on the edge of the O-ring or whatever, but generally people, the rule of thumb is you take a little bit of new oil on your fingertip like so, wipe it around that gasket so that it doesn't get dried up and seize. So wipe a little bit of oil on there, screw in the new filter. So snug it up, you know. You don't want it to leak, but you don't want it to fucking be, you don't want it to be a pain to get off like the one I just did was. So you put your filter. The next thing that I do is not really necessary, but I have an old, not old, it's good oil, but it's from the last time I changed my oil, in the jug still, not used. So I'm gonna pour that in the filler cap and kind of flush out some of this old black nasty oil, and you should be able to see it. I poured a little bit of good oil into the fill cap and just kind of let it flush out, and it's much clearer than the old oil was, but it's still kind of dirty, so it brings out a little bit more crap. It's Probably completely unnecessary, but I like to do it. So I'm gonna let that finish draining, then I'll put the plug back in. Make sure there's no bullshit where you gotta put the plug back. A lot of people say that you should replace these every time you change your oil. I can see where it could be, you know, a good idea to replace it. And if I had one, I probably would, of course, but I don't have one, so I'm not that worried about it. Then you tighten it back up. You can use the wrench that's in your kit. I just find using a socket is a little easier, obviously. Tight enough to where it doesn't leak is what I would recommend. Make sure your filter is nice and tight, not too tight though, just tight enough to where it seals nicely. Same thing with the fill bolt. Make sure these hoses are back where they belong. I don't even know what they drain, but there's some kind of little drain hoses. Make sure you push them up in there. So those little hoses should run something like that. And then they kind of just pop out the bottom. So the next thing, take your shift linkage. You want to put it back. Make sure you line it up. You can fill it right now, but I like to finish everything on this side before I fill the oil. One good idea though is to fill it before you put the fairing back on. If you have any kind of leaks, you can fix them before you put so that you don't have to take all the fairings back off. There you should be able to see the line and the dot. Again, make sure that those are lined up, otherwise your shifter won't be in the right spot. Then you put it on there, put your little 10mm bolt back in, tighten it up. So again, this doesn't have to be super tight, but just get it snugged up where it won't, make sure it won't come out. It should be pinching right here. It should be pinched just a little. Before I put any fairings back on, I like to fill it. You can actually fill it before you do that, what I just did, just in case you have a leak near the filter. So here we are on the opposite side, being the right side of the bike, in case you didn't know. Take off your cap. Here's your fill, your dipstick or whatever. So you don't want to just pour it all, like a whole gallon of oil in there. Pour a good bit of it and then check it. So I'm just gonna put that in there like that, not necessarily screw it down right yet. Funnel always helps. And start pouring in the oil. I'd pour about 2.5 and then check. And you can see, hopefully, that it's just barely on the dipstick. So this time I'm going to screw it in. And you don't want too much oil either. Well, there you have it. So it's in the checkered area, but it's not way up here. It's actually about right here. So that's a pretty good oil level. Put back on that other fairing and you're good to go.
We